The Gunblazer asks, have we ever had a better group of coaches in the same division as there is now in the AFC West? That's a point that Chris has made a couple of times. And you look at it top to bottom. You look at the AFC West right now with Andy Reid, Sean Payton, Jim Harbaugh, and Pete Carroll. I can't think of a better collection of coaches ever before in the same division at the same time. Chris, I think, mentioned at one point, like maybe the NFC East in the 80s when you would have had Parcells and Gibbs and Landry. The problem is the Cardinals were in the division then. And Jim Hanifin, who is tied with Ken Whisenhunt for the longest tenure ever in the history of the organization. The team's been around for well over 100 years. 6 years is the record. Jim Hanifin was, I think, 80 to 85. I may be off a little bit, but it was in the 80s, and I think it ran through 85. That would be 6 years, 80 to 85. Ken Whisenhunt did 6 years. Bruce Arians didn't get to 6 years. 6 years, that was it. So if the Cardinals are part of the equation, and they were in the 80s in the NFC East, that keeps it from being top to bottom what the NFC West currently is. If I'm missing something, chastise me on social media. I'm used to that. Florio at profootballtalk.com. Chastise me there. I'm used to that as well. But I don't think there's ever been a better top to bottom, every coach, no weak link, high-end, potential Hall of Fame, if not actual Hall of Fame coaches. I think Reed's a walk-in, no-brainer, upper room Hall of Famer. Carroll gets in, or at least should. Peyton should get in. Peyton may have another Super Bowl win in him, and he'd be the first coach to win a Super Bowl with two different teams. That would make him a no-brainer. And Jim Harbaugh, hey, he needs more time in the NFL, but if he goes like he's done during his years with the 49ers and now with the Chargers, he'll end up having the resume to get into. Speaking of AFC West coaches, former coaches who have won a Super Bowl, Jon Gruden. Here's a question. How can Jon Gruden even potentially be subject to the NFL kangaroo court as it relates to his lawsuit? He wasn't even in the league when he sent those email messages. Is it just because he was in the league at the time the emails were leaked? Let me try to keep this as simple as I can. What the NFL did, they fashioned an argument for arbitration based on the NFL's constitution and bylaws. And in the NFL's constitution and bylaws, the commissioner has the power to arbitrate, to be the final word via arbitration on anything that involves conduct detrimental to the game. So the argument is the Gruden emails are conduct detrimental to the game. So anything related to the Gruden emails, the disputes would be resolved by the commissioner. The problem is the lawsuit isn't about the emails. It's about the process for leaking the emails. It's because the commissioner or someone else deliberately weaponized the emails against Jon Gruden by leaking them first to the Wall Street Journal, then to the New York Times. That's the thing the case is about. So, okay, well, that's conduct detrimental too. So the commissioner has the full power. Anytime it's anything that is conduct detrimental to the league, I've got the full power by virtue of the bylaws and constitution of the NFL to resolve the dispute. That's the argument they've made. The problem is it failed before the lower court. It succeeded before a 3-judge panel of the Nevada Supreme Court, and now it's pending before the full 7-judge panel as to whether or not that's going to be enough. And the ace in the hole, stick to sports. Stick to sports. The ace in the hole is the U.S. Supreme Court, where I believe the NFL is confident that any issue that it takes based on arbitration and its clauses that force coaches and others out of the court system, I think the NFL is confident it's going to win 6-3. So the NFL came up with an argument that I personally reject, but I don't have a vote. But I think it's a bullcrap argument, but it's one so far, and it may save the day, and it may keep us from ever finding out who ordered the code red and who compromised the integrity of a season by forcing Jon Gruden out 5 games in. Could have happened before, could have happened after. He was forced out during the season, and that undermined, we got to protect the integrity of the game, the integrity of the season. We don't change rules during a season because we have to protect the integrity of each season. You forced out a coach. Somebody forced out a coach during a season. And we're not going to find out who it was and what happened if it goes to arbitration. We only have a chance of finding out if it doesn't. And here we are, nearly 4 years from the filing of the lawsuit, and we still don't know. Is it going to open court? Is it going to arbitration? And here's hoping if it does go to open court, Jon Gruden just doesn't take whatever settlement the NFL offers and ends it. A couple of years ago, one of the biggest stories we had of the month, I think it was July, was Gruden reportedly intent on burning it down, pushing this thing to the limit. If he's still willing to do it and he's able to go in open court, there can be a lot of burning down that Jon Gruden does. All right, next question. What are some of the most notable cases of corruption you've observed in the NFL? That one comes from BIJ703. You know, the thing that I remember, and this came during the Saints Bountygate scandal, this was the first moment that it dawned on me that you have to be very careful about taking anything the NFL says, being the league office, at face value. And it was during the Bountygate scandal, and they had Mary Jo White, who has become one of the de facto people they send to investigate when issues come up with the various teams. They hired her to basically sell to the media why the Bounty scandal was a big deal and why the players needed to be suspended and why yada, yada, yada. And I remember when they took sideline audio from the NFC Championship, and she characterized it in a way where it was one player that supposedly was saying, "Give me my money," and they painted it as being crystal clear and a smoking gun for this plan to take out Brett Favre in the 2009 NFC Championship. And I remember having an epiphany when I was watching it very carefully, frame by frame, and listening to it very carefully. It wasn't nearly as clear as she was saying. And that was the moment where I first decided I'm not going to believe anything they say. I'm not going to be smitten by Big Shield. I'm not going to just accept it as true. I'm going to question, and I'm going to suspect that there may be some BS going on behind it that they're trying to get us to buy. And I carried that attitude into Deflategate. I know if Chris was on right now, we'd argue about it some more, but I'm very skeptical of how they handled it. I think they had an end in mind and they worked backward to justify the end result. And it was very shoddy and it was very substandard. And I think the conclusion should have been, there may have been a scheme in place in past games to deflate footballs, but the evidence that it happened in this specific game, the 2014 AFC Championship, is inconclusive. That was another one. The whole thing with, and, you know, look, the concussion stuff, I mean, how many years did they downplay? Did they deny? Did they hide with the Mild Traumatic Brain Injury Committee, which was run by Elliot Pellman, Paul Tagliabue's rheumatologist, just delaying the reckoning as long as possible. Now, the reckoning ended up being not very bad. Yeah, they had to pay a shitload of money to former players as part of the class action settlement. But once everybody knew that, you know, it's not good for your brain to play football, it's not like they had a land rush out the door. Chris Borland was the only guy that made that conscientious decision to retire early in his career. All these other players keep playing. Guys keep playing. There may be a reduction in youth football, but there's no reduction in college or pro football because of it. But the way that was handled, as evidenced by League of Denial and the concussion film, it was shameful. And one of the things that never really got pointed out the way it should, the NFLPA was right there. The Players Association was right there, seat at the table. And it was an existential threat to the National Football League, although once it all came to light, it really didn't have the same impact that people thought it would have. Another thing that came to light a couple of weeks ago and hasn't had the impact people thought it would have, the collusion case. And I'm only talking about it because I got a question that I think is important because it goes to the legal nuances as to why the arbitrator got the collusion case wrong. Because remember, he found, Christopher Droney was the arbitrator, he found that the league office and the Management Council wanted teams to collude, encouraged them to collude when it comes to fully guaranteed contracts in the wake of the Deshaun Watson 5-year, $230 million fully guaranteed deal. They wanted them to do it, but the teams didn't do it. Wanted it, but they didn't do it, right? My position has been there's plenty of circumstantial evidence to show that it happened. The question today with where's the collusion? There's a screenshot of some testimony from John Mara, longtime chair of the Management Council Executive Committee. And the quote from, the quote from the arbitrator, several owners also stated they make their own independent decisions given the competitiveness of the league. Mr. Mara, for example, asserted, I am not going to be told what to do in terms of an individual player contract by anybody from Management Council or by anybody from another club. He further explained, and this is the quote, just the thought of me calling Jerry Jones or somebody and asking him not to guarantee Dak Prescott's contract or somebody else's contract, I mean, he would laugh at me, among other choice words, I'm sure. Just the whole notion is ridiculous. We're out there to win games, and we're going to do whatever we can to improve our own teams. And if that means give more guarantees, we're going to give more guarantees. Okay, fine. That ignores the fact that the league office and the Management Council told the teams to watch the guarantees they were giving. And why even have the Management Council? Why even try to herd the cats if at the end of the day, well, we ignore all of that because we're in competition? There's no reason to try to get anyone on the same page about anything because all the teams should be doing is operating as secretly as they do with their other competitors. It's the Coke and Pepsi example. It's the Walmart and Target example that I gave in relation to the Broncos and former Walmart CEO Greg Penner, who now owns that team. The attitude expressed by John Mara should result in no Management Council and no coordination and no effort to compare notes. But what do we have? We have the Dean Spanos, Michael Bidwell text messages celebrating the Kyler Murray contract and pointing out that it's going to help the Chargers avoid giving Justin Herbert a fully guaranteed deal. We've got the internal emails from Greg Penner to his business partners telling them that the other owners will be happy with the fact that they avoided doing a fully guaranteed deal with Russell Wilson. That's the issue. That's the reality. That's the circumstantial evidence. And that's why jury trials are so damn important, because the collective wisdom of a jury would pierce right through the bullshit. The self-serving, no, we didn't do that. I dealt with that for years. I got to wrap this up, but let me just make this point, because when I was practicing law and defending employees who had been fired from their jobs, no one ever got on the witness stand and admitted it. They all said what they had to say. Oh, what about perjury? Who cares? The lie gets baked in the moment they sign the termination slip. Everything that's said after that is just consistent with the initial lie that was told not under oath. Getting to the truth is difficult. You need circumstantial evidence to get to the truth. You need to be able to show actions that defy the words. In this case, the actions, the text messages sent between Bidwell and Spanos defy the words of John Mara. The communications within the Broncos defy the words of John Mara. You need to have a jury to sort that out. At the end of the day, the system arbitrator was not comfortable saying all of these multi-billionaires are full of crap. I reject their explanation. I'm going to focus on what they did and what they said when they weren't on the witness stand. Hi, it's Mike Florio. Thanks for watching PFT on YouTube. Hit subscribe for the latest news and analysis from Pro Football Talk.